What's going on, guys? We are here with a very, very bright screen. I apologize in advance for this, but I wanted to get this video out very, very quickly. My number one goal throughout all of the RLCS X is going to be transparency. When we can, we are going to be as transparent as possible through seeding for Swiss, through whatever we need to do. That is my goal. Now, we'll see how much I'll be able to do that. It's very likely I'll be able to do pretty much all of that. So I am going to try and keep you guys up to date with how teams are seeded, with how teams are selected, with Swiss matchups and all that. We had a video earlier this week about Swiss matchups of where I was going with for Regional 1. And there was a couple things I wasn't really a huge fan of, like the reseeding after every single round. I was still trying to work through how I wanted to do it. And mathematically, I couldn't really find the best thing or like a solution that I like that I could actually point to. But I did want to get rid of human bias where I could. Had like a lot of long talks with some people from the community, some people at Psionics, about how we should go about it. And here's where I landed. So this is what we're going to do for Regional 1. And if we like it, this is what we'll continue to do through Regional 2. And I'm going to walk you through this. This is just a Word document because I want to get this video out nice and quick. I still have to make my video about the European teams and their roster moves. I'll try and put that out super early Saturday morning to catch people up. But I wanted to get this video out on Friday so you guys would know exactly what's going on, how teams are going to be matched up, and also for the pros if they want to watch and know, like, here's how my road will go and what we need to do. Obviously, if you win, then you're fine, but you know what I mean. So let's get into it. So we're still going to do the 4 pools, and we're still going to keep the, in the first round, the randomization that, like, the RLCS number 1 cannot play number 13. It's not the same because the European qualifiers ran a little bit differently where they needed to find a grid spot. So it's no longer they cannot play a lower bracket team. It's just the number 13 seed in their group. But we wanted to keep it the same across Europe and North America, where North America, they will not have to do that. So that's how it'll land. And I didn't want to make these two things different for the 2 regionals, so I wanted to keep that the same. So basically just we'll keep from the majorly lopsided matches on the top end from happening. So the number 1 seed can't play the 13th seed, the RLCS number 9, so in this case that would be the 5 seed of a group, cannot play the 9 seed of that same group. So those will still happen. Then after that, we propose to do... We'll have the seeds by committee, which we are no longer going to do. So the seeds by committee, they have still happened for the RLCS teams 1 through 10. And for Europe, to put like in perspective, when I put out my European video, the only thing different from my power rankings from the power rankings that you'll see, or the rankings that you'll see for Swiss from the seeding committee, is that my number 2 and number 3 are switched, which actually really doesn't change anything when we come to Swiss, because those 2 would be the top 2 seeds in their group anyway. But that's the only thing that is different from the averages of the entire committee compared to what I would have had them at. So the 10 seeds are extremely accurate for me and hopefully for everyone else. So we're still seeding committee by that. Then we have the whatever your seed was going into that top 64 of the closed qualifier. If there was any ties in the closed qualifier, then that was the tiebreaker of whatever your seed was coming into it. But if there was no tie, then you just get that spot. And then again, we split the teams up into groups. I showed that last time, so you don't have to worry about that. So we move on to round 2. The way it'll work is the seeds that you had initially will hold true to round 2, no matter what happens, which basically means that even if, like, say the seeds 4 and 5 from the same group were incredibly close, like say it was like a 0.1 difference in the committee, that will not change as long as you both win, or if you both lose. So that won't change at all. So basically what you'll have is, if the top 8 teams win, you'll have the top 4 and the bottom 4, or a top 4 and 5 through 8 will have a random matchup between those 2 groups. That's how that'll play out. The bottom side, it's the same thing, 9 through 12, 13 through 16. Say there's an upset, if like the 15 seed beats the number 1 seed, the 15 seed would still hold their 15 seed, so they would be in the lower group of the 1-0 teams. The 1 seed would be in the higher group of the 0-1 seeds. But again, it is a random pool of 4, and you'll get an RNG matchup from there. So after that, we throw out the we throw out the seeds that you got from the very start. We try and get away from the human bias as quickly as we can. Really can't do much about it right now because there is nothing else to go on. Once we have points with the RLCSX for Regional 2 and Regional 3, like if we keep this format, it'll just be point-based and you won't have to worry about that. So you move on and you go on to round 3. So here's where you will have a lot of teams at 1-1. So the way we will seed the upper and the lowers, the 2-0s and the 0-2s, you keep their initial seeds. So we're still keeping with that a little bit. So we're not throwing it out completely yet. And honestly, we're not throwing it out until round 5 completely, but we're trying to get rid of it for most teams as quickly as possible. So the 2-0s and 0-2s are still whatever seeds they were, they will continue to have. So there'll be 4 teams left at the top. If it's 1, 2, 5, and 8, 1 and 2 are in a group, 5 and 8 are in a group, you randomize those matchups. And it's the same on the bottom, 0-2s. The 1-1s is where it gets a little bit different, where if you were 0-1 in round 2 and you won, you'll be in that bottom pool. If you were 1-0 and you lost, you'll be in the top pool because you started off better throughout the tournament. Now, this does make upsets kind of weird, right? Like, say Vitality loses in round 1. When they get to round 3, like if they are 1-1 at that point, no one's going to want to draw Vitality, but that is very closely the same as what would happen in a bracket if Vitality lost early. Look at Mouse Sports when in the Spring Series. They had to play Vitality and Dignitas back-to-back or whatever. That normally wouldn't happen, but when upsets happen, then that happens. And we want to at least give a lower seed team a chance to earn an easier matchup. Like, we don't want to pin down a lower seed team the entire time. Because if they beat a Vitality and then you're like, well, they're going to hold their 15 seed the entire time, then they're always going to have to play a top team, which doesn't seem fair necessarily. So we will move them up, and they would be on the upper side. So you then will get a random matchup. That'll be the same thing we do again in round 4. The only difference for round 4 is there's an odd number of teams. Well, I guess they're both even, but they're not equal teams when you go to the 1-2 and the 2-1 rounds. I know I'm not visualizing this very well because I'm trying to get this out rather quickly. And this is more for the hardcore audience. We're not going to really get into this on the show. We'll just be talking about, what the matchups are. But when you get down to the 2-1 teams, you're going to have 2 teams drop down from the 2-0s. So they will be on the top side of the pool no matter what. You'll have 4 teams come from the 1-1 pool and move up. So 2 and 4 obviously doesn't work for RNG purposes. What you'll take is the initial seed. Whoever's the highest seed when they began the entire tournament, they will move up into that top side of the pool. So we'll keep initial seeds for one more round, but again, it's for not as many teams. And again, because that's like the best tiebreaker we can have. Because the other ways that you could do it is like maybe by who they beat, but it's also because it's an RNG base that they can't really control that. So we're going by what their value is coming into this tournament. And again, when we move on to Regional 2, that's going to be all point-based. So it's like, all right, well, they're the better team in terms of points, so they would move up. On the lower side, 1 and 2s, it's the complete opposite. It's the lowest seed of those 4 teams would drop down to the lower pool to join those 0 and 2 teams that just won to 1 and 2 to get an RNG effect going on there, 3 and 3. For the final round, we have 3 teams left on both sides for the 2 pools, as you can see down here. Round 5, you got 3 teams that just won that were 1 and 2, 3 teams that just lost that were 2 and 1. You just randomize, so that's 2 pools. You randomize those matchups, and then you play out the last game. So that is how it all works out. Again, no rematches allowed, so if there is a rematch, we will re-randomize until there is no rematches, and so on and so forth. So I think for this first Swiss, we probably won't have any way to show it publicly, but we are in talks of trying to get this so in a way we can have it be in the public eye when we do the randomization. It's just kind of difficult to make that all happen on this first one. You'll have to trust us, and honestly, so I get it, because people will be like, oh, it's rigged or whatever, but I mean, why would we rig it? What does it matter to us? So you'll just have to trust us for this very first one, and we'll see going forward. We'll try and come up with a solution. We'll see if it happens. Next up, how are seeds going to be generated for the top 16 of Swiss? So there will be set tiebreakers in here, because obviously when you go to a top 16 in Swiss, well, when you're in Group A of Swiss, there's going to be 2 3-0 teams that make it out. There's going to be 2 3-0 teams that make it out of Group B. That's 4 teams tied at the same exact record. So how do you do it? So seeds are determined in this order. Best match record, so obviously 3-0. So that would be the 4 top seeds. You go to game differential next. So if a team went 9-0, number 1 seed, 9-1, 2 seed, 9-2, 3 seed, and so on. Now, if they're still tied, it goes back to their initial seed, because again, that was the strength they had like over the summer throughout the community tournaments, who was in the best shape. So they will get that tiebreaker there. Now, again, these don't matter that much for the top 16 Swiss, because we are still going to do those pools of 4. For the 3-0s, it honestly really doesn't matter. Like, it will matter maybe later on when we talk about round 2, round 3, round 4 with those initial seeding. But it'll matter. So for round 1, like obviously all 3-0s are going to get a random match versus a 3-2 at the bottom. Problem is there's 2 extra 3-2s that won't be in that group of 4. So whichever 3-2s had the better game differential will bump up into that 9 through 12 range. So that's how that would all play out. Now, how do you determine the playoff bracket? Very important. 8 teams, 1 life each. It's going to be intense. So we are trying to get away from the initial seed as much as we possibly can, which again, that'll turn into points in RLCSX at some point. So this would then go to your best match record in the top 16, because we feel like those games matter more. You're playing more hard opponents, so that should matter the most. So the 2 3-0s will be number 1 and number 2 seeds. To break that tie, you go to game differential in top 16. If it's still tied, you go to their best match record in top 32. So if, say, there's 2 3-0s, obviously, in the playoff bracket. If they both have the same game differential of like 9 and 2, you then go to their Group A and Group B. Maybe they were in the same group. Who knows? But if one team went 3-1 and the other team went 3-0, that team would get the 1 seed. The other team would get the 2 seed. Then it goes to game differential once again for top 32. Once again, we're trying to avoid going back to the initial seed. Now, that has value, obviously. It's not like the committee is pulling names out of a hat. They're basing it off the results over the summer. But again, we want to get away from it as much as possible when we can. So that is how Swiss will play out for the entire weekend. There is no human bias except for the initial seed at the very, very beginning. Now, keep in mind that my European seeds for the RLCS were nearly identical to the seeding committee. I'm part of that seeding committee, but my 2 and 3 were flipped, which again, not a huge deal. To me, they are incredibly accurate, and just basing off what we've seen, it works out. So that's how we're going to do it. Once again, trying to be as transparent as possible throughout this. I'm going to probably tweet out possibly the pools before we make the game choices of like who plays who. When I can, obviously I'm going to be spinning a lot of plates. I'm going to be on the show. I'm going to be helping behind the scenes with all this stuff. So I'll try and get it out as soon as I can. But just keep that in mind. But I want people that want to follow along incredibly closely to be able to in some way. So just wanted to get this out there real quick for you guys. Thank you guys for all the feedback on Reddit or on YouTube as well of some ideas to mathematically work this out. And I looked through them all, and I tried to tweak some to my liking, but at the end of the day, I was like, I don't know if there's a way to like perfectly calculate seeds based on this. So I think that this is probably the fairest way. We talked about this a little bit last time with when it is a bracket, seeds will flip a lot. And this kind of incorporates that at different times, but it's not as crucial throughout the entire tournament. So I think it still is what I want to see from Swiss. So I hope you guys enjoy it. It's been a pleasure trying to create this format for you guys. And yeah, once again, if you guys have any questions or if you have any concerns, feel free to throw them in the comments. I read them all. I might not answer them all, but I'll read them. So thank you guys once again, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.